Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. This is Adam Huss coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Thanks so much for listening. Every episode, I thank you for listening, and I want you to know I mean it. I'm sincerely grateful for the time and attention you give to the content that I'm creating for you. You inspire me to continue to do my best to ask better questions, to listen more openly, and to highlight the people who are doing the difficult but beautiful work of building a more ecological, equitable, regenerative, and exciting world with wine. The work of creating these podcast episodes brings a lot of joy and meaning to my life. And in many ways, I feel like it uses the whole package of my skills and life experiences. Any work that does that is rare and special, and I hope every one of you has a chance to find that for yourself. So I want to celebrate today the first ever donor to the Organic Wine Podcast, Michelle de Weingart. And I'm sure I just mispronounced your name, but thank you so much, Michelle. A lot of time goes into each episode, from researching to interviewing to writing to editing and producing and publicizing. Each episode that you listen to represents many hours of work and real expenses. Donations like Michelle's are not only incredibly encouraging, but they also make it possible for me to be able to continue to prioritize the time to create this content for you. If you'd like to donate, you can Venmo at Centralis. That's at Centralas, and it will be associated with my name, Adam Huss, and you can let me know if you'd like me to thank you on a future podcast, or maybe you'd like to donate in honor or in memory of someone else. Thank you so much for your support. Another special announcement. Have you heard of Vitinord? I found out about Vitinord through my interview with Tom Plocker. If you haven't listened to that episode about breeding new grapevines, I highly recommend it. Vitinord is the world's only international cold climate grape and wine conference, and it will be hosted in Burlington, Vermont from December 4th through the 7th this year. This conference takes place only every 3 years, and it alternates between Europe and North America. So if you miss this one, it will be a while before you can attend another one in the U.S. Keynote speakers this year will include Greg Jones, Elaine Chuckin-Brown, and J. Stephen Castles, all of whom I hope will be future guests on this podcast because they're incredible. There will be viticulture and winemaking parallel sessions, the opportunity to meet and mingle with some of the brightest minds helping to advance the ecological adaptation of wine, and of course, wine tasting. If you've been listening to the Organic Wine Podcast, you might have noticed that we've been to Vermont a couple times recently, including this episode you're about to find out. And that's no coincidence. Vermont seems to be an epicenter for some of the seismic shifts that are happening in the wine world right now. Yes, that's an earthquake metaphor. What can I say? I live in Los Angeles. So I have this feeling that Vitinord 2022 is going to be a very special event, a nexus for cutting-edge thought that will shape the future of wine. One of those things that you'll wish you were there later if you didn't go. So pack your parka and your snow boots and let's go. Registration and info is at vitinord.org. That's VITINORD.org. My guest for this episode is Justine Belle Lambright of Kalche Wine. Together with Kathleen, Chery, and Grace Meyer, Justine has founded Kalche as a worker cooperative. If you're wondering what it would mean for a winery to be built as a worker-owned business, that's exactly what we talk about in this episode. Justine goes into detail about what is involved in setting up and running a winery as a worker cooperative. Because of the hard work they have already put in with their coworkers, Justine is able to give us almost a step-by-step how-to that includes many of the strengths and weaknesses, challenges and opportunities, as well as giving some great reasons why you might want to do this as well. If you're sick of big wine, if you envision a more equitable way of running a winery, if you want a business that is run democratically, if you want to think of people as humans rather than as human resources, and if you think business should serve human needs rather than the other way around, then this conversation is for you. Justine not only breaks down the details of how we might go about setting up our own worker cooperative, they also offer resources and lifelines to provide practical help and information to anyone actually undertaking this kind of human-centered business building. And we talk about Kalche's hybrid space juice and make a strong case for why American hybrid grapes need to be included in the mainstream of the wine current wherever it's coming from. Justine reads a poem, we meditate on death, and consider a cosmic perspective on ourselves, and generally have a really fun, informative conversation. Enjoy. Justine, welcome. Thank you for doing this. It's great to talk to you.
Hi, Adam. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I only know what little I've heard from people who know you and know Kalche and, the others that you work with, who have said wonderful things about you and what I've been able to find, online, which isn't a whole lot. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited to hear about this project that, is relatively new for you guys and that seems really exciting and really cool. So I don't know where you want to start. Do you want to start with how this all got going? Maybe a little bit about you and why you're doing what you're doing and
Yeah,
where you're doing it.
totally. So my name is Justine Belle Lambright. I use they, them pronouns. I am originally from Massachusetts, but I, became a human being in New York City, and currently live in Vermont, which is where the project that we're talking about is happening. As of like a year and about 10 months ago, I co founded a worker cooperative winery up here in Vermont with my two business partners, Kathleen Chery and Meyer. We all have very different skill sets, but sort of came together clandestinely to form this, worker cooperative winery. We are centering sustainability, diversity, and, what we've come to know as the decolonization of big wine. And that's with a capital B, capital W.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've used the term like industrial wine or something like that, but I like big wine. That
Yeah,
makes
big
more
wine. It
sense.
makes them seem a lot more, evil, sinister.
That's great. Great.
Yeah, they've got, those like waxed mustaches and monocles, big wine.
Right, right. Top hats. Yeah, totally.
Totally. Which like wouldn't be far off because, the systems of big wine that were particularly, focused on smoothing out are the power and wealth hoarding, the white supremacy, the chauvinism. And so yeah, those are all things that I think of when I think of, like the Monopoly man.
Uh, uh, I don't exactly, right. So, well, keep going. I feel like I interrupted you. You were gonna
Oh no.
maybe. Oh,
Yeah, so I got into wine about a decade ago, but I've been working in restaurants since before I was legally allowed to work. My uncle had a place on Cape Cod,
nice.
and I decided when I was about 23 that I didn't want to work a job at a desk. I had gone to college and started doing, the regular 9 to 5 thing, and I was so miserable. People were boring. You're talking to the same people all the time. There's no flexibility in your schedule. It was just like every day felt the same. And I was losing it. So I went back to the Cape and decided to get back into restaurants. And then, because of outside pressure to, have a plan and, what are you going to do for your career? And, it's not just a job, it's a career. So I was like, I mean, I guess I'll do wine stuff. That sounds cool. Like those people seem really smart. And then like since, randomly making that decision, I was kind of Robert Frost, like two roads diverged in a yellow wood, where either I was going to take a class and focus on wine, or I was going to get my like 200-hour yoga teacher training. And it literally came down to like, well, if I do wine, then I can wake up later. And so,
That's great.
and this is kind of the first time that I'm, really putting those pieces together. So we're working through this together, Adam.
That's
Um,
awesome. Well, I should introduce you to my friend Kiara Shannon, who is the yogi sommelier, and
oh,
so I think she
yes,
figured out a way to combine both of those. Uh,
totally. Yeah, I wasn't there yet. But
but
yeah, so that was like, sort of like how I got into wine specifically, but like stayed in restaurants. And then, for a shorter period of time, like let's say the last 5 years, there have been so many points in my professional life where I've kind of had to reevaluate who I was looking at as like my mentors, or, people that I wanted to model my career off of, because of Me Too, because of, bosses that I had that weren't necessarily making smart business decisions or thoughtful business decisions or thinking about their employees, people just doing these awful things to innocent people that worked for them, and it taking so many ugly forms. And so that was sort of the impetus for us to come together and form Kalche, because we were all just so fed up and so tired of being disposable. And the name Kalche, it's ancient Greek, and like the literal translation is like the purple fish, or to catch the purple fish. And so Kalche was the sea mollusk in antiquity that they would use for purple dye for royalty and aristocracy. But then later, after, demand grew so much and there was some overfishing, it came to more signify a deep search in your mind, taking a lot of time on your own without distraction to think. And that's, where we were at the beginning of the pandemic when we came together and started this. So yeah, that's my spiel.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to jump right into some of the bigger questions, if that's okay. I mean, we'll get
Totally.
into the wine, but like I love these origins in sort of workers' rights and worker ownership, and how does one build a business with these ideas in mind, and what are those values? I mean, can you feel free to go into detail about what guided the process, but really, how do you do that? Like, how does one think about operating as a business, and in our very business oriented culture of the United States, and build a structure, or build a whatever it is, an entity that still retains the humanity of the people that are part of it?
Damn. Yeah. Really fantastic question, and one that we are asking ourselves every single day. I really envy at the moment, like where I'm at right now, in the body that I'm in right now, the mindset that I'm in right now. I really envy people that can overlook humanity, because like once you see someone as a person, it's really hard to take advantage of them. If you see them as a body, if you see them as a means to an end, and that end is your profit, and however you get there, you don't necessarily care as long as the outcome is what you want, then of course, being in a capitalistic system is going to work for you.
Right.
And so for us, having been those disposable parts that had been, used, abused, and thrown away by like many people, we were like, how do we put workers first? How do we make it so that, these people who are never going to break a sweat, with us in the winery or in the vineyard, or, not come to a single meeting, but like want to tell us what to do, from behind a screen. We just like weren't at all interested in that and compromising in that way. We wanted to make sure that like we were all 100% comfortable with any decision that was made for the business. And as of right now, there's only 3 of us. We're planning on hiring on a 4th person soon. It has taken a lot. It has taken a lot to do that, but we are learning so much on like how to be better listeners and how to really have a relationship with people. And 3 is an extremely hard number, but we're learning, yeah, just basically how to interact. You need to know how to interact with people to be able to work in a democratic business like this and care about people. So we can't vote or make decisions if we're only thinking about ourselves. We really do have to be thinking about the group as a whole, and not only that, but like the future of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure, that we're setting a good example, and the choices that we're making, we are so confident in that if someone else replicated what we're doing tomorrow, we won't regret it 2 years from now. And we feel like in our industry and in most industries, there's just like this need and this want to be the first one on the next trend. And, everyone wants to be an influencer in these ways, but they're just putting out whatever they can quickly. And so we're taking a more deliberate and slow route. So to answer your question, like how we came about and how we put this all together was we got all of our like handbooks and stuff like that from former employers, and we sat down in a room for a week, and we were like, okay, what did you like and what didn't you like about past places that you've worked? Like, what are some grievances that you've had that weren't handled properly? What would have made you feel seen or held if that had been handled properly? And sort of reverse engineering former positions that we had or former companies that we had worked with. And it was like my business partner Grace and we had been working for the same people, and like things started to get weird, and we're sitting across from each other in the office, and we're just like, should we be doing this? Like, I feel like if we had all of the information, we could figure this out and do it on our own. But because we were on the management level, ownership had all of the secret documents for the how everything ran on the back end. We had to pretty much beg to get any information on like how the business that we were running was actually doing. And so from there, we were like, let's present a way to buy this business from them. Let's see if we can put the power into our hands. And we were inspired by a business in Burlington who 6 months prior had done a community crowdfunding raise to buy a cooperative building. So 3 businesses came together and organized this along with a nonprofit organization in town, and got, I think, like 50 people in the Burlington area each to put up like $10,000, and were able to buy this building. So we were really inspired by that. They gave us the name of the organization they were working with, and we went to them and asked them to help us put together a business plan to buy the business from our former bosses. And they weren't really interested, but then we were like, well, we have this business plan for a worker cooperative winery, so why don't we just do it? Like, we did all the work.
Yeah. That sounds great. I was going to ask about a business plan. I mean, does it look different than a business plan, and if any other kind of traditional capitalistic business plan, and if so, how?
It's very, very similar. It's almost exactly the same. The only thing that I would say is different is that with our incorporation documents, we needed to have bylaws. So we needed to file bylaws with the government along with our incorporation documents. So these are things for like how someone can buy into the business, how many hours someone has to work before they're eligible for employee ownership, what it costs, the different how like the patronage dividends will be paid out at the end of the year, assuming that there's a profit, that sort of thing. And so that's kind of a lot of pressure to be doing before you even have like a viable concept. I feel like in traditional business, startup situations, you can like incorporate and have that there so that you can, call dibs on a name and be able to like apply for a bank account and, various things. But like we needed to like actually know how our business was going to run in the next like 5 years. We had to know what our exit plan was. So there was a lot more like intense talk about like, okay, what do we do? What do we do, and what is going to be important to like literally codify with the government? You have to really get your priorities in order right at the beginning. But yeah, because we were morally driven, it was pretty easy for us.
And this was so the structure that you're talking about is a cooperative.
Yeah,
So
a
which is
worker
a
cooperative.
worker cooperative, which is a legal structure.
It is in Vermont. It's not in every state. So there are some entities that we work with, like for grants that we've received, and they don't recognize worker cooperative because we filed that with Vermont specific. So for like the United States, we're considered a C Corp, but in Vermont, we're considered a worker cooperative.
Okay, got it. Um, yeah, that's really interesting. I so that your local neighborhood co-op, if you have one of those, would be a similar situation. Is that correct? Or
A retail co-op is similar in the sense that you buy in, and in a retail situation, those are the groceries that you get. And then at the end of the year, you get a patronage dividend. And you're also able to, vote on company matters and things like that. But for a worker cooperative, the only people who have a vote are people who work enough hours that year.
got it.
So,
So
so yeah, that wouldn't necessarily be the same on the retail side. And that's another reason why, we chose this format, because we wanted every worker to have a vote. So if you are a seasonal employee, part-time, full-time, if you have worked enough hours in past years and are approved by the board, you can become an owner as well. And so making sure that every single person whose livelihoods and families, communities rely on their paycheck, we make sure that they have a say in what happens to their lives and their livelihood.
how do you handle wages in a worker co-op?
Yeah. So, as of right now, we are all paid the same.
Mhm.
So all three founders were paid the same. Anyone who comes on, we will pay close to what our starting salary was, at least for now. That's what it is in our, 5-year plan. That people who are coming on, and I am fine with letting you know that like it was $40,000 that we started at. So anyone who comes on in the future will be at $40,000 a year, which is not at all what anyone on the founding team deserves. It is not what anyone who like is working full time deserves. People deserve a lot more than that to live, and need a lot more than that to live in most areas of the United States. However, for us to turn this into a long-term viable business and like be stable enough to eventually retire with dignity, like that's just kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah,
But any of those changes, so some co-ops have it that like salary increases have a maximum capacity to them. So like the CEO can't make more than 10 times the lowest paid person. And like
right.
that's one of those. Or, like people's salaries can't increase more than, X amount. Um, or like individuals' salaries can't increase more than X amount without the rest of their team also receiving raises.
Mm,
Um, and so
got it.
those things are not in our bylaws; those are policies, and we're still working on those. We're still
Got
working
it.
on those.
Yeah, I mean, there's always probably an edge case that makes where you could find an exception where you're like, well, but what if this?
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
imagining, yeah,
Yeah. And,
and
and and it's like it's a very fine line with co-ops because it is so ridiculously bureaucratic. You need a vote, you need quorum. It's very much like Robert's Rules of Order. Um
right,
but at the same time, it's so much more human. Like those things are there more as like safety checkpoints to make sure that nobody gets crazy, nobody goes out of line, but like at
right.
the end of the day, like it is a people run business, and that is what's most important. So like anything can be changed with a vote, whether it's governance, policy, any of that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's great. And so, before somebody achieves the minimum number of hours
Hmm.
to get ownership, how are
Hmm.
they paid if they're not, part of the team yet, so to speak?
Yeah, so it would be the same. It would still be their regular salary. Where being an owner really comes into play is that, you know, you get a vote and a voice at
Got it.
meetings.
Got it. Okay.
And then assuming that there is profit at the end of the year, that vote will like lend voice in where that money goes. So one cool thing about co-ops is that like there are a lot of safeguards for savings. So you have a lot of different categorized accounts within your chart of accounts in you know, your QuickBooks or whatever you use. And so like a certain amount of money just gets squirreled away. You can't look at it. It just goes there. But then at like an annual all member meeting, you take out this nest egg and then you can say, okay, either, and this is just an example, but you can be like, either we all get a $2,000 bonus, or we invest in a new canning line and up production 50% next year. And assuming that that's the case, we would get X amount more in our patronage dividend, like at that point. And so, you know, you get to hear from everyone, like, do y'all personally need money right now? Like, will that help your life if we get you the money right now? Or can we all wait for a bigger paycheck down the line? But it's not something that is, you know, an edict that is being, you know, brought down from people that don't work there. You get to make the decision on where the money is going.
And then you vote on
And
that.
then you vote. Yeah, you vote.
So some people might, yeah. So I like that. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess seasonal workers, you brought those up. So how does that work? I mean, I'm imagining you're buying some grapes. You're not farming all your vineyards yourselves, and you don't, you know. So these are people that you aren't specifically. I mean, people that are doing the work in the vineyard aren't specifically paid by you or hired by you, even. So are
Correct.
you? Is that a goal for the future to be able to control the vineyards as part of the co-op as well, so that you can guarantee that they you know, those people that are doing that work are treated by the same, you know, under the same business plan, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. So you bring up a good point. We actually haven't talked about, you know, the folks that work for the vineyards specifically, or like the small vineyards that we work with. You know, we haven't necessarily talked about that. It's mostly been people who would come in and like liaise directly with us. But I am literally writing that down right now, and I'm going to bring it up at our next meeting and we'll vote on it. Because I think that you bring up a really good point, albeit more paperwork. But
Yes,
um,
no, I mean, well, it just seems like, yeah, knowing, you know, what I know about, like, that is where the big, you know, where the big exploitation happens in the wine
yes,
industry, is where like we can do so much good work on, you know, on the seller side, on the business side of the winery. But if we're buying grapes and we don't control, you know, the vineyard management team,
yeah,
we have no idea what those wages are. I mean, you know, and it's hard to get information out of the, you know, out of either the workers or the ownership, you know, in
sure,
those organizations that are doing vineyard management. And you know, we know that they're not great. We know it's minimum wage, you know, very,
one hundred
you know,
percent. Yeah,
minimum wage and like no overtime and, you know, all kinds of stuff like that.
yeah,
You know, like yeah, like especially during harvest. I mean, and that is the, you know, there's the uncertainty of being a vineyard worker, because you have, you know, like if that is your main gig, you know, you have to figure out what you're going to do when it's not harvest, which is most of the year. And then, you know, you're sort of bouncing around and you never get
yeah.
that continuity from, you know, that a winery worker would have. So yeah, I just
100%. And
it's
yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. We're trying to even the playing field, you know, behind, like between the people in the cellar, the people in the vineyard, the people in the office. And the reason why we brought up the seasonal workers, this is something that we think that we've created. And if there's anyone listening out there that has heard of other co-ops offering worker ownership opportunities to seasonal workers, I would love to hear about them, and I would love to reach out to them if you have a contact. But our it came about as a sort of larger conversation. We like to say that we stand on a lot of soapboxes. Uh, and that's because, worker justice is migrant justice, is racial justice, is climate justice.
Yeah.
And so you really can't pick apart one without dealing with all of them in some way, shape, or form. And so originally the conversation was migrant justice. So like, how do we come up with one solution for the awful treatment of migrant workers in this country? And so the grand scheme, the big picture of this was like, well, if we can find a way to make seasonal workers eligible for employee ownership, is there a way that down the road their ownership of a US company can facilitate, fast track, what have you, their citizenship? Is there a way that we can team up with like a J1 or, some other type of visa program to provide people, kind of like a straight shot to citizenship? And also, guarantee that like they have a say in their wages, that they have a say in like what their schedule is going to look like in, daily break and, even just like a policy where you're allowed to relieve yourself during your shift. Like some people
Yeah.
aren't even able to go to the bathroom during their shifts.
Right.
um so yeah, just giving people a voice was where we came up with the idea for the seasonal workers having a pathway to ownership. But how that will work out is very much up in the air, but that's kind of part of the fun with where we're at. We just get to say like, this will be something that we think will do some good, and we'll see if it works.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think about this a lot too. And I mean, a lot of these questions I'm asking is just, I'm running a winery, but it's basically me and Wendy, and we hope to grow at some point. And at
Yeah,
that point, bringing on, building the team of people who are part of this, I definitely think about that. I definitely think about how to make that, how to correct some of the like you said, reverse engineer the things that you don't like, from your
yeah,
past jobs and the way you've been treated, and build something that is the ideal that you would like for yourself if you were being hired again.
totally.
And so it definitely comes from that. And I think that is such a great problem to solve, of like how to like I guess the question I'm thinking about is how to give full-time employment year round to seasonal workers. How
Yeah.
to build that into a business plan so that like maybe you aren't just growing grapes or fruit, that gets harvested once a year. Maybe there's other agricultural things that you bring into the fold that all contribute to, and this goes back to more, like a polyculture idea anyway, which is probably more ecologically sound than a monoculture anyway. So you're sort of solving a couple problems at the same time. Anyway, I'm just sort of riffing.
No, 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 no.
But it's, these are the kind of ideas that, like, when you ask these questions, is that what you're finding, I guess, is my question to you, that you find like you thought you were just going to start this thing that was going to address these problems, and then as you started asking these really important questions, you found like a rabbit hole of problems that needed solving, and which lead to bigger and bigger solutions, kind of thing, bigger and bigger problems and bigger solutions.
Yeah. I mean, there's, yes, definitely like so many rabbit holes to fall under. And like once you feel like you've come up with an okay temporary solution for one thing, another thing pops up and it's kind of just like whack-a-mole. But also there's like systemic things that we are seeing and like finally getting to name that people were either afraid of or just were like too privileged to be able to notice these patterns. But like, I don't think it's a coincidence, the fact that like cellar hands and vineyard workers are so separated in a lot of large scale vineyards. And a lot of the times they're separated by color. There are lots of black and brown bodies that work agriculturally, and and they only represent like less than 1% of vineyard management and ownership.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think it's one of these things like, you're saying like, how do we get these seasonal workers to be employed year round? And one of the really great things about worker cooperatives is the encouragement to be cross-trained.
Yeah.
And a common misconception is that in a worker cooperative, everyone does everything. That's not true. A worker cooperative, everyone has a say, but it's the same as any other business where your job is your job. And, anything outside of that, like there has to be a conversation.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, that is the criticism. I mean, a criticism I've heard of that idea of cross training, which is, you know, there is the idea of specialty and expertise in
yes,
a field that comes from focus and dedicated focus to a single thing or to just a narrow focus, a more narrow focus. That yeah, and it,
absolutely.
especially if your forte isn't that thing that you're being cross trained into. Maybe your forte is in the vineyard and you have no interest in the chemistry of the cellar, for example.
Totally.
Um,
Totally. But like that is a really good way for someone to be a full-time, like a
right,
year-round worker. And
right.
so, figuring out like how do we break down the barrier from vineyard to cellar?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
anyone has any solutions, I would be so happy to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, it's true, but it's sort of like I made that one analogy, the difference between, let's say like all the viticultural practices that you can become expert in,
Mhm.
and then all the, chemical processes or, winemaking processes in the cellar that you can become expert in. They don't necessarily marry. I mean, you
Right.
certainly I'm interested in both, and I think I see the through line between them, but I can envision somebody doing that. But maybe that's not the best analogy. Maybe it's like marketing versus viticultural practices,
Yeah.
because like somebody that's great at social media doesn't necessarily want to know how to prune vines, or that's just one stupid example, but you know what I mean. Like there's um that kind of specialty is needed, and yeah, it's almost like maybe we're looking in the wrong direction by asking how to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And 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 how do yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I brought up the idea of this like sort of polycultural vineyard
Totally.
farm idea of where you have continual year-round agricultural work for those who that's their specialty and that's what their interests and forte is. um
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me here sitting in Vermont and, we're at the beginning of September and it was like 45 degrees this morning. I don't necessarily know about how year-long polyculture would work. Um but you made me think, and this is something that we haven't necessarily said, but like part of the reason why we do think of this like progress, and I'm using air quotes, from vineyard work to cellar work is the salary difference, right? So like why are we valuing the people who are picking the
yeah,
grapes and actually giving us this product? Why is that valued less than the people who are turning it into something else? And why is
right.
it that the people who are then just picking up that bottle that already has a label and a cork with it and handing it to the distributor, why are those people making their salary plus a commission? And again, the people that were actually out there sweating and bleeding, like, why are they the lowest paid folks when they're doing the hardest work? And so it's hard to compare. Like what work is hard work. Everyone's job is hard, but it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be like this massive stratification in pay,
Yeah,
because you work outside or because you work inside. Like that's just silly. And so
yeah,
that's why one of the reasons I love that the patronage dividends are based off of hours worked and not someone's title or position or like the fact that they, let us borrow some money that we're going to pay them back for. The
right,
money is
right.
going to go equally based off of how long you were doing your job that year. And if the person who worked the most hours is the CEO, then yes, the CEO, in theory, we don't have one, but then yes, like they get the highest bonus. But if not, if all of the vineyard workers, were out there hustling and putting in more time, sorry, like they get the biggest raise, and that's just fair.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I definitely, the idea of there being like a value hierarchy to employment is this strange capitalistic thing that doesn't make sense when when you look at
Totally.
the interdependence of all of us on each other.
Yes.
Um, it's yeah. Well, so obviously there are tons of questions still to be answered, but have you guys, stumbled on any really good solutions that have been working for you that you can share? Things that you would recommend that you would want to do more of, or anything in that I realm of this actually turned out to be a good idea and it seems like it's doing okay so far.
I think for us, there really was no other way for us to be able to form a business. So I would say that, for anyone who doesn't have, like a pile of money that they're sitting on, or, if your credit's not that great, or if you have a community of people around you that have a good idea, there are organizations that can be there to lift you up. I I have a lot of student loan debt. I had some healthcare debt. I, had credit card debt from, just like being a regular human without savings. So
Yeah.
like when we were putting together the business plan, I was so nervous that, I don't have any collateral to put on the line. I didn't know what we were going to do for money. And the fact that like there are opportunities out there, like if you just do research and you put your idea on paper, um that like there are people who will put faith in you, and without you having to like sell your soul or your idea to them. And so that was
Yeah.
really reassuring. And I hope that other people take a chance, because it's doable. It's hard work but doable.
Were there any resources that you can refer people to for business planning and along these lines, or just thinking about these things to think through structures and bylaws or anything at all like that?
Yeah, 100%. So I am really like the processes person of the business. And so I have like a links and resources spreadsheet, and it is pretty much with like, there might be a couple of omissions, but it's pretty much everything that we read, every source that we cited, every person that we talked to that like went into our business plan. I have all of that. So if there's anyone who's listening who's interested, I'm happy to share that. You can reach out to hi@kalchewine.co, or you can DM us at Kalche Wine Co. Yeah, KALCHEWINECO. And I would be more than happy to share it. But we got help from the Vermont Employee Ownership Center, was like one of the most helpful. Matt Kropp was who we worked with, and he was like, "Oh, you are like looking to do like put like this line in your bylaws. Here's this other local co-op who has something like that, and you can talk to them about how it works in their day-to-day operations." Or you're looking to do like a sources and uses table for your funding project. Here is a cooperative accountant who can help you, like make everything look copacetic. So there are organizations like that, Vermont Employee Ownership Center, statewide across the majority of the country. So I would definitely recommend that folks look into that. And just like reach out to co-ops. There are these tenants that all like, if you decide to be a cooperative business, it's like an agreement that you will abide by these. And one of them is co-ops helping co-ops. So like if you are saying like, I want to start a democratic business, I want to like invigorate my community in this way, I will assure you that any other, cooperative employee, worker owner, what have you, will be more than happy to share their info with you.
Well, thank you so much for offering to those resources, and thanks for doing all this work. I mean, you're really, it's again, you're going to be the shoulders that I'll probably be standing on at some
Oh my
point.
gosh.
But really, really, thank you for just going out there and trying to figure all this out for those of us who want to do the same thing. It's a huge, immense help to have. I know. I'm sure it's difficult. I know it's hard work, and I know mistakes must get made, and
Yeah.
you got all the stresses that go along with that. But that's why I'm just saying thank you for going
Thank
through all
you.
that. I think
I
that's really
appreciate
great.
it. It means a lot. It does feel like screaming into an echo chamber most days of the week. So it's nice to know that, there are people out there that see it, that, see what we're doing.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, it's such a beautiful. Uh, I mean, it's a beautiful way to do what you're doing. I mean, to do what we're trying to do. I really appreciate it. And I want to talk about. Well, I want to talk about the wine because I know that's a way
Yeah.
we can also sort of support what you're doing by hopefully getting to buy and taste your wine. What are you guys making? What is the idea behind all of that as well?
Totally. Well, we like to call it hybrid space juice.
Nice.
um, so the grapes that we're using are all cold hardy hybrid grapes. Most from the University of Minnesota, but some Cornell. And we're managing 1 4-acre vineyard that we have through like a crop share agreement. So we put in labor in exchange for a steep discount on the fruit.
Mhm.
And then we are purchasing from a couple of other vineyards around the state. Last year, all of our fruit was from Vermont, but this year we are getting some apple and blueberry additions from Maine. Um,
Oh,
yeah, we're
wow.
really excited. Kathleen, our director of production viticulture, she just went last week to the RAS folks.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, they had been doing some blueberry wine pressings, and we slid into their DMs and we're like, "Hey, any plans for those skins?" And they were like, "No, if you can come and get them next week, like they're free if you want to experiment." And so we were like, "You had us at free."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'm
that's
hoping to talk to them sometime soon,
oh my
actually.
gosh, they're so sweet and so funny and fun. And we
Awesome.
all met at ABV in Brooklyn, although I had their wines before. But and yeah, ABV, anything but vinifera,
Right.
uh, put on by Jade Marley and by the hand portfolio via Zevrovine Selections. Doing such amazing work, such a fantastic community of folks that I'm so proud to be a part of.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny that there's a connection between a lot of people I'm talking to these days. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
um, that's great.
We're
So
talking to a
what
lot of hybrid heads.
Yeah, totally, yeah. I'm becoming one for sure.
Amazing, amazing. Mwahaha.
I mean, I just think like, California needs to embrace them because it's I really think growing them here means you literally don't have to spray. Like
Yes,
I mean, I think for real, like anybody
yes.
listening who's doing viticulture in California, like I'm talking about grapes that you literally never would have to spray. Like no
Yeah,
joke. Because I mean, you don't have, I mean, obviously you do have to manage them on the East Coast where there's, you know, im- like immense pressure
yeah, a lot
of
more
a
mildew pressure.
bazillion mildews and everything
Yeah,
else. But not out here where powdery is like our main nemesis. And in some areas, even that, like where it's hot and dry, you get minimal pressure on powdery, and then
yeah.
these things would. And also, you guys have to deal with like high acid, but we have these super long growing seasons, so we
Mm,
wouldn't even have to worry. I mean, we could probably pick at ripeness levels that would even take care of some of that excessive acidity from these American native varieties.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
I'm
and
just, yeah,
yeah, you're mentioning like spraying, but also like irrigating.
right,
You
right, yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
like you can just let them grow and put in, the minimal effort that it would, take for any other, sort of plant. You don't have to hold its hand and, put its helmet on and its blankie and which is really how I feel about
Right, right.
Jennifer at this point.
Sing it a lullaby every night so it doesn't throw a
Exactly.
fit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I'm telling you, like I work with vinifera. I know it's like,
Yeah.
man, even if you coddle it, it still throws a fit. It's like
Totally.
man, I've been giving you like on the regular sprays, and still you're getting powdery. You're still, you're still, susceptible. You're still a feeble little critter. Um,
Absolutely. It's so
yeah.
funny to like talk to vinifera people, people who are like really invested in like maintaining the vinifera quo, let's say. But like it's like talking to someone who's like in a bad relationship and it's like, but they're not treating you well. You're miserable. Get out. Yes, it's bad now, but it could be better in 2 years, in 3 years. And,
Yep, that's
just like
hilarious.
really trying to get people out of those toxic relationships. It's almost 2023. We're too old for that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, you can do it in stages. I mean, I know change
Yes.
is hard, so but like think about if just 10% of your vineyard you didn't have to spray. Like think of the
Yeah.
reduction in cost, the reduction in, time, which is a reduction in cost, a reduction in, CO2 output.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like just even that. I mean, it would just, and then you could just add that into the blend, and nobody would be any the wiser that your Cabernet had, 10% Petite Pearl in it or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
and it would immediately reduce your bottom line, like, or whatever, increase your bottom line. I don't know what it'd make it better,
Yeah,
whatever the
yeah.
reduce or increase. We keep it in the black better. Um,
um Real I oh my gosh, so many things I want to say here. But yeah, like nothing against vinifera,
No, that's my point too. Like, it's not about prejudice in either direction. I mean, I think now that
100%.
we've gotten past that idea that we have to be prejudiced against hybrids or American varieties, like,
Yeah.
great. Now let's start using them because, with the vinifera, like, it's not like
Yes.
one is bad and one is good. It's not a binary. It's like let's see how we can help
Yeah,
each
and
other out.
absolutism in any form is what we are trying to avoid.
Right,
It's
right.
just like maybe don't use 100% of something that is like actively, deteriorating the ecosystem around you, but like
Right. Yeah.
also do you.
Yeah. Right. Right.
For
Yeah.
as long as you can, good luck with that.
Right, right. Yeah, there may be an expiration date already,
Yeah,
in the foreseeable future, not some unknown distant thing. It's like that
totally.
that that time may be coming rapidly
Yeah.
for many of these. So yeah, jump on board before it's too late. That's all we're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was supposed to be ominous.
Yeah. So what do you talk about what you are working with? I mean, if you want to talk about varieties or styles, however you want to talk about that. I mean, why the space juice? What's the cosmic aspect of this? What's the
Yeah.
otherworldly?
Well, like the cosmic aspect is mostly just the fact that it's very easy to forget that we're all just like clusters of organisms flying on a rock through space. Like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like don't put so much on to like this idea of wine because it really is so small in the grand scheme of infinity. That being
Mm.
said, and like not to be super douchey, like we see it as, like futuristic ferments, but it's not what we're doing isn't actually futuristic. It's more taking a nod from ancient, ancestral, indigenous fermentation methods.
Hmm.
So Kathleen does a lot of foraging around the winery. So like for example, we had our first release with Viticole last year, and
Hmm.
we made a piquette called viburnum. And so it started off with some marquette skins, and then it needed a little bit of oomph. And so Kathleen like went out to like literally the driveway of the winery, and there are these high bush cranberries there, known as
Ooh,
viburnum. And she was just like, okay, let me pick a couple buckets of this off and we'll add this in. So
nice.
instead of like a more traditional idea of, oh, this needs something, what can I intervene chemically to give it the flavor that I want? Kathleen
Yeah,
was more like, what do we have available outside that could mimic that flavor?
yeah, that's great. Yeah,
And yeah, I think just like not holding hard onto definitions that, like wine is exclusively grape juice, wine is this, wine is that. It's like this absolutism about having anything be not exclusively one thing, and it can't be anything else. You just made everything so much harder for yourself. So like with your question, like what exactly does hybrid space juice mean? It means like yes. It means like yes, if we have access to this, we're going to fucking ferment it. We're going to throw it in a stainless steel tank and see what happens. And like Kathleen is like such a mad scientist. She has such a mind for chemical reactions and fermentations, and I can't say it enough that like her ability to like take a pile of fruit and turn it into a symphony is just so impressive. And so like Grace and I are pretty much just like, okay, here's when we need money by, figure it out.
that's great.
Yeah, and like let us know how we can help you. And like that's so like she definitely can speak to it a lot more, but like
Okay.
her
Cool.
she wants to just like show off what Vermont has to offer. And there's a lot of apples. Now there's like a bunch of hybrid grapes, but like there's a ton of maple. And so we have a bunch of maple sap that we got from a neighbor, and she's going to try and make a maple sap piquette.
Oh, fantastic. That's
Yeah,
going to be
just
exciting.
yeah, just like really cool stuff, and like maybe
Yeah.
keep that on its own, maybe use it to like add to a wine spritzer or what have you. Yeah, we didn't save a ton of skins last year. We put them out in what we like to call the bear pile. But we're going to I'm sorry?
No, just laughing at the bear
Yeah.
pile like that.
It's
You're attracting them, huh? You're luring them in.
100%. Yeah, like you put anything sweet outside and the bears are going to be on top of it. Like that's how far out this winery is.
Wow, fun.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
But
that
yeah,
sounds
we're
great.
going to try a lot harder this year to like do more. We're going to do more with seconds. And I'm really excited to see how that's going to play out.
Um, you made me think of this when you were talking about floating through space on a rock.
Yeah.
I've heard I heard of this meditation. It sounds very morbid, but I think it might be like an old samurai meditation where you meditate on yourself being like terribly killed, like just brutally maimed every
Mm,
day. Like this is a daily meditation of like you meditate on your own death in any innumerable brutal violent ways, and that this is how you maintain detachment, you maintain like a calm mind because you've already dealt with those fears, like you've really looked at that hard, and the worst possible way of dying you've already
mm,
considered on a daily basis. You consider it, and so you go into your day as a samurai or whatever it is without that fear anymore because you've already envisioned the worst that it could be.
yeah.
um and I like this idea, like maybe the you don't have to meditate on your brutal murder every day, but maybe meditate on the idea of being on a mossy rock floating through space, hurtling through the universe every day, and get a little perspective on your life and what you're doing is a really nice way to temper our sort of obsessions and maybe engender a little compassion for each other too, a little empathy in the
Totally.
as we go throughout our day and realize you know how small it can be, these things that we get wrapped up in.
Okay,
What
so really quickly, I'm glad that you brought that up, because there was actually this poem that I read a couple of days ago that my friend shared online, and I was thinking originally of one way that like maybe I would want to share it. But it
Ooh,
definitely like touches on what you're saying. Do you mind if I read it? It's short.
I would love that. I would love
Okay.
that.
So this is by don't laugh at the handle, but the Twitter handle is Crypto Nature. And it says, an ant crosses your carpet. A spider weaves a pattern older than mammals beneath your stairs. Just nod, breathe, and think, good. It's all still here. The forest, the mountains, the desert, at home in my home. The sterile white box is the stranger, not the ant, not the spider.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And like,
Thanks. That's great.
totally. Yeah. I definitely don't necessarily agree 100% because I don't love people who aren't paying rent in my home. Um, but like on the grand scheme of things, it is, it
Well,
it is,
yeah,
such a good reminder. Like, no, these things are permanent. The things that are ephemeral are us.
yeah, yeah, it's true. Well, the spider's paying rent. I mean, theoretically, it's
Totally.
organic pesticide.
Yes. Yeah. Spider, you've got to pass.
The ant, I don't know,
And
could be eating your home.
seriously, yeah, you're not paying for groceries either.
Right.
Pack your bags.
That's funny. That's why I used to say I provided low rent housing for bees. I would just, charge them a little bit of honey during the growing season.
That's funny.
Well, awesome. Can you shout out like well, you already mentioned your website and everything else, but it's kalchewine.co, not .com, correct?
Yes. So it's kalchewine.co. And yeah, you can find us on all of the social medias. I'm Justine Belle Lambright at the Belle Justine. And yeah, I recently got brought on to be the event director for ABV, Anything But Vinifera. So I will be, getting together another really fun conference. This next one's going to be in Miami. So I invite anyone who enjoyed what we had to say today to stay tuned, follow along on Instagram, and hopefully come out and join us out there January 16th to 18th.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Any parting words otherwise other than those shout outs?
No, I mean, just thank you so much for making the space and for, asking about what this little group of weirdos is doing in the middle of Vermont.
Well, thank you for doing it. That's
Totally.
what I have to say. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And if you did, please leave a review and let me know. Also, I hope to see you at Vidanor this December.